The CEO's empire was built on technology, but one catastrophic crash brought everything to a standstill. Millions of dollars were vanishing by the second, and the brightest engineers failed one after another. In that chaos, no one imagined that salvation would come from the most overlooked corner of his mansion, through the hands of a young black boy, the Maid's son. But the moment he touched the system, lives changed forever. How could someone society dismissed as invisible become the only one who could save it all? But first, please make sure to subscribe the channel and comment below from which city you are watching this video. The CEO was a man who seemed untouchable. His name echoed in boardrooms, his company's software powered global corporations, and his every decision carried weight worth millions. To the outside world, he embodied success, living in a glass mansion perched above the city skyline, surrounded by the best money could buy. Yet inside those walls, his world was carefully divided. The executives had their polished suits and grand offices, while those who served in silence, the cleaners, the drivers, the maids, remained invisible. Among them was a woman who had worked in his home for years. She never complained, even when whispers of disrespect brushed against her dignity. Her young son, quiet but observant, often accompanied her after school. He carried books under his arm, scribbled notes in worn notebooks, and lingered in the corners of the mansion, unnoticed by those too important to care. Life seemed steady, predictable, until the night when the system his empire relied on suddenly collapsed. A single failure spiraled into chaos, threatening to erase everything he had built. Experts flew in, engineers scrambled, and panic set in. But what no one knew was that the answer to the CEO's crisis would come from a very person society least expected, the Maid's son, quietly watching from the shadows. The crash came like a silent storm. At first, it was just a flicker on the CEO's private screen, numbers shifting in ways they shouldn't. Then came the alerts, red notifications stacking, servers shutting down, clients screaming across continents. Billions of data points vanished in seconds, and suddenly the empire he had built stood on the edge of collapse. He summoned the brightest minds he could buy. Engineers, coders, cybersecurity experts, they rushed in with laptops glowing and voices shaking. But hour after hour, nothing worked. The deeper they dug, the worse it became, as though the system itself was fighting back. Every failed attempt drained more money, more reputation, more hope. Inside the mansion, the air grew heavy with fear. Workers whispered about the CEO's rage, about what would happen if the empire truly fell. Yet in those halls, no one noticed the quiet presence of the Maid's son, sitting at the kitchen table, his notebook open, his pencil racing as he sketched what he overheard. He wasn't supposed to be near the meeting rooms, but he listened anyway, absorbing every detail about the corrupted servers, the broken code, the blind spots none of the professionals could see. But what burned deeper than curiosity was the way he and his mother were treated in those frantic hours. While executives barked orders and stormed through the house, his mother was told to keep quiet, to stay out of sight, as if her presence during the crisis was an inconvenience. The boy watched his mother shrink into herself, carrying trays of coffee for men who didn't even look at her face. And in that silence, he felt the weight of something more cruel than broken code, the weight of being invisible. Yet what none of them realized was that this boy had been teaching himself coding in secret, piecing together knowledge from library books, borrowed manuals, and every spare moment. He knew things they didn't imagine he could know. And as he scribbled notes, he saw patterns the experts missed, flaws in their approach, loopholes in their fixes. His heart pounded with the urge to speak up. But could he? Would anyone listen to the Maid's son if he dared to step forward? Or would they laugh, dismiss him, or worse, humiliate his mother in front of everyone? The hours dragged, the crisis grew, and the empire inched closer to destruction. Somewhere between fear and anger, the boy made a decision that would change everything. Because he knew what to do. He just had to find the courage to reveal it. The crisis had reached breaking point. Investors threatened to pull out, major clients demanded answers, and the CEO himself looked like a man drowning. His empire, everything he had built, was seconds away from collapse. Around him, the so-called experts clashed in panic, each more desperate than the last. And then, from the very edge of the room, a small, trembling voice spoke. It was the Maid's son. Every head turned, not with curiosity, but with disbelief. A boy, barely a teenager, standing in a room filled with million-dollar consultants. The silence was sharp, cutting, almost cruel. Someone even scoffed under their breath, as if the very idea of him offering a solution was laughable. His mother froze, her face pale, terrified that her son had overstepped, that his boldness would cost them both their place. But the boy didn't back down. His hands shook as he held up his notebook, covered in scribbles of code and diagrams. He explained what he had seen, the hidden flaw no one else had noticed, the simple yet overlooked fix buried in chaos. His voice cracked, but his logic was flawless. Still, the room bristled with dismissal. The CEO's glare burned into him, a look that said, "How dare you?" And then it happened. The boy took a laptop left open on the table. Fingers flying faster than fear, he typed the sequence he had written in secret. The screen flickered, warnings stopped, and one by one, systems began to stabilize. Numbers realigned, servers hummed back to life, and the impossible crisis suddenly stopped. The room was silent, stunned. The experts who had failed for hours stood frozen, their pride shattered by the boy they had ignored. The CEO, too stunned to speak, could only watch as the maid's son closed the laptop with trembling hands. For the first time that night, everyone in that room was forced to see him, not as invisible, not as a shadow, but as the one who had saved everything. But what came next would change far more than just the system. When the system finally stabilized, relief flooded the room. The empire had been saved, but the silence that followed carried a different weight. For a moment, no one knew what to say. The consultants, red-faced and shaken, quietly packed their bags. The CEO, who had always believed control rested only in power and prestige, sat motionless, staring at the boy who had done what his entire army of experts could not. His mother stood nearby, torn between pride and fear. She had spent years moving through those halls as if invisible, careful not to disturb the world of the powerful. Yet in that moment, her son forced the entire room to see what society had long ignored: brilliance that did not wear a suit, courage that did not come with a title, and worth that cannot be measured by skin color or social class. The incident spread quietly at first, whispered in corners, denied by those unwilling to admit they had been wrong. But its impact lingered. The boy had not just fixed a system. He had shattered an illusion that intelligence, value, or possibility belonged to only a chosen few. And while the CEO would later try to rewrite the story, those who were there could never forget the truth, that salvation came not from power or privilege, but from the hands of a child society dismissed before he even had a chance. Injustice thrives when voices are silenced, when potential is ignored, when value is measured by the wrong standards. But sometimes the most overlooked voice becomes the one that changes everything. So ask yourself, how many bright minds are still being ignored today? How many solutions are lost because of prejudice, because someone like that boy is never given the chance to be heard? The next time you see someone dismissed because of where they come from or what they look like, remember this story. Greatness does not ask for permission. It simply waits for the moment it is finally seen.